Hey, sleepy friends. It's Sleepy Reader, Damien. I am continuing my usually weekly countdown that I've been doing for a month or two now of ranking the comics I read from this past week in terms of my pleasure reading them, whether or not that lines up with a serious critical look at the comics is highly in doubt. It's just how I responded, what I was enjoying. As this is my personal vlog. So yeah, I can't believe I had 17 comics this week. I read them all. Well, actually there are 3 or 4 comics that I set aside because I have to find the other issues the ones I got behind on. But in the meantime, after I did my haul, I stopped off at another comic book store and picked up a few more comics. So in all, I have 17 that I've decided to include in this countdown. And I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job because pretty much with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, had a good time reading them all. There was nothing that was like, oh my God, this is the standout comic of the week. But there's a lot that I enjoyed. I had a good time with almost all these comics. My least good time, so coming in at number 17, was this one-shot from Dark Horse called The Quiet Kind. And the more I read it, the more this artwork bothered me. And I could see some of the good aspects of the story they were trying to tell here about, I don't know, this universal flame and these animal-like creatures who are guarding it, and it goes from there, and it kind of creates a group of kids who are misfits or otherwise damaged, who are given powers by the trickster, and that causes a lot of problems. The story was not quite strong enough to overcome my dislike of the art. It wasn't a bad story, but it just, overall, it just felt like a lot of work for me to get through this. I can't say I totally regret buying it, but yeah, just the least fun of the comics that I got this week for me. And then coming in at number 16, and this is probably one of those cases where it's a much better comic than me ranking it as my second to least favorite comic of the week. I still totally love that cover, just showing it there. I love it. But there's a lot of, I don't know, there's just, the comic was just sort of unpleasant to me. The character was, I don't know, he wasn't literally whiny, but the main character just seemed to me to be, I don't know, he just annoyed me in his kind of I'm unhappy with life kind of attitude, even though that's certainly a valid fictional position to take. And this is going to sound really silly, but things kind of centered more and more as the book continued around the word fuck, around the F word. And I didn't think that was very clever. I'm already getting, I know it's going to get a lot worse. I'm getting tired of the F word as people's favorite word for communicating something. Coolness, I guess. But I really think it's a punch you in the face anger word when you come down to it, if not a word well, it's a word that has a lot of different uses, of course, but it has its roots in our culture in a lot of negativity. And I don't know, I just felt kind of turned off. And really in Collapser, the main MacGuffin, this idea of a black hole, is really a black hole, but it goes inside the person and does something to them, and other people want the black hole or want to kill the person who has the black hole or what have you. Maybe down the road, all of that will have a really wonderful explanation and seem really clever, but it didn't seem really clever there to me, and I probably won't make it that far with that comic. in at number 15 for me was The Creeps. And this probably rounds out the 3 comics that I found to be kind of a slog to get through. And everything else beyond these, were easy, fun reads. Surprising with The Creeps, because the last few issues of The Creeps I've really liked and ranked really high. But every one of the stories in here seemed, I don't know. A good example is Who Gross There. They struggle. The need for the twist ending pushed all of these stories into really serious, silly directions, very silly directions. And while that has worked in other issues, it just all worked against it in these issues. And I even felt maybe the artists were less enthusiastic about these particular stories, because there seemed to be a lot more art that was more hastily done. Anyway, so yeah, I guess maybe with an anthology book like this, you have some bad ones and some good ones, but The Creeps is very locked into its need for a very quick twist ending, which sometimes is a lot of fun and sometimes just doesn't quite work. I still get a great kick out of the weird, goofy Richard Corbin cover, but covers alone are not enough for me. But that said, The Creeps is definitely not. I've been reading The Creeps for a long time and having a lot of fun with it for a long time. So one kind of weaker issue is not gonna pull me away from The Creeps. This stays on my pull list. I'm gonna have to have a lot of bad issues before I take that off. So like I said, everything else from here on was a breeze to read, fun to read. So I am ranking Spider-Man Life Story, which I've been ranking kind of high in the last few issues of it, a little lower again at number 14. And I think it's because of the story structure. There's a lot of cool elements, and now we're in the elderly superheroes involved in the kind of the Civil War plot of that big event and movie, as many people are familiar with the Civil War, where Tony Stark and others want to register and kind of draft, at least in this version, draft other superheroes, make them all working for the government. And Captain America and some others are fighting against that. But that's it's semi in the background, semi in the foreground. We have Spider-Man, the original Peter Parker, not his clone, drawn out of retirement because his clone was managing Parker Industries. And anyway, all of that was good. But the resolution was very unsatisfying. This issue kind of exemplified some of the weaknesses of this series and its attempt to do one decade, or give you a slice of one decade in one issue and leave it at that. And so in this case, this slice gave us a very unsatisfying conclusion to some of the problems. They were unexpected, I suppose, because Peter Parker himself was not much a part of the solution of anything. So anyway, yeah, so it ranked a little lower for me. And then, so it's interesting, books that I totally love one month, then the next month I'm kind of, okay, this was okay. Bronze Age Boogie, I think it might have been inevitable as we're now unreeling more parts of the plot, but we're not introducing as many exciting new ideas as maybe the first few issues did. So I still enjoy this a lot, and there are some revelations in here, especially about the Kung Fu guy's father. But given that his father's kind of totally bad, that fits in with the whole Bronze Age kind of vibe, but I don't know. Somehow this issue just didn't click with me quite as much as previous issues. Still, this is a fun series. I'm planning to go through it to the end. There's probably only 2 more issues, at least in this round. I have to say, overall, the first round of Ahoy Comics still stands taller for me than the second round. I did actually really like the conclusion to the Major Ursa story. So I guess for the next 2 issues, we're going to have a different backup, which they hint at, but don't tell you exactly what it's going to be. The miasmic moon thing. I kind of that fits in with the Bronze Age boogie type of thing. Miasmic moon thing. So I hope that'll be fun. And still loving the high quality of Ahoy Comics. Okay, and here's a weird one, because I talked last time about how I was in the middle of reading these 2 issues of Savage Avengers. So these aren't really from this past week or even the week before then. But I'm putting them in, these 2 issues together, in at number 12, because while I really loved issue number 2, and I love I love these covers by Finch, but I love the interior art by Deodato, a wonderful Brazilian Marvel artist. The art I found got a lot weaker with issue 3, and I started to think maybe the story's going downhill a little bit too, the writing. So it's feeling more muddled. There's less, the communication of what's going on between art and pictures is just not quite as good. And I'm starting to get that feeling that I've often gotten in the past with Marvel Comics, where they'll start off strong and quickly deteriorate, and they're too rushed, they're too sloppy, the deadlines are too tight, with them putting them out more than once a month and everything. And I fear that's where Savage Avengers is going. Although I like the first 2 issues so much, I'll certainly grab issue number 4 if I can. So yeah, that was at number 12. At number 11 was Jimmy Olsen, and maybe I had too high expectations. I love Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. I like other things Matt Fraction's done. I don't love everything he's done. And this first issue of Jimmy Olsen, it's funny because on the cover he says, "Boy, do I have a story to tell you." But the interior are these little fragments, kind of like chapters, but not really, because the first one is a 2-page thing, or maybe 3-page thing about Jimmy Olsen's ancestor. And then, I think of it as a 2-page thing, and then a 1-page thing of them being on a Jimmy Olsen and Lex Luthor debating on a TV show, both as 2 of the richest families in the history of Metropolis, I guess. These opening salvos were not interesting reads in my mind. Then we did get a much more interesting read of this chapter or fragment called "The Pal Who Fell to Earth," where we basically get an example of Jimmy Olsen on one of his wild, wacky adventures, which causes Superman has to save him, and it causes all kinds of damage and destruction to Metropolis, which leads us to another story of sorts, another fragment where Perry White fires Jimmy and then is forced to rehire him. He fires him because the insurance is too expensive, but then is forced to rehire him by the publisher because Jimmy's videos of his adventures get the most hits on the newspaper's website, and so are making them the most income. And that leads to Jimmy being assigned to go off to Gotham. So we get another fragment called New in Town. So my point is, all of these are fragments that aren't quite stories. So it's funny that on the cover it says, "Boy, do I have a story to tell you." I really loved the Steve Lieber art. I felt like Matt Fraction might be leading up to a story he has to tell, but I don't feel as an issue by itself this held together much at all as a good read. It just had some fragments, some of which were interesting, some of which were not. And although the last fragment, I guess I'm going to spoil it a little, leads up to the revelation that the city he's moved to is Gotham City. Other than that, the fragment is just kind of odd and uninteresting and unfunny. So it's a lot to do about nothing, just to have this double-page spread to show us that we're in Gotham. And I hope that the next 11 issues aren't Jimmy Olsen in Gotham. That's kind of the high concept that I suppose could be good or bad. But does everything have to go back to Gotham? I mean, we're too much Gotham already, in my feeling. So anyway, it still could be really good. I plan to get the whole 12 issues unless it gets really horrible. I just had slightly higher expectations. So I ranked that at number 11 behind Assassination, which is a fun and highly flawed book. It's ironic because I feel like it was a very clever, very light story about assassins and had a fun sense of humor and and kind of clever little twists with, at those sort of simplistic level of clever twists, if that makes sense, because it was all so cartoony. And although, so I feel like Erica Henderson was wasted on this, but also not good enough for this. So on one hand, I feel like, her work has so much more impact, matters so much more when she was doing Squirrel Girl, then this is just kind of meaningless. Yet at the same time, I don't feel like she was that good at doing this. I don't think because this had a lot of action scenes where you had to kind of follow what was going on, and I just don't think that's her strength. So I feel like on some sense she was wasting her time on this. On the other sense, I felt like she wasn't good enough for this. That said, this is ranking, right in the middle at number 10. I had a lot of fun reading it. I'm glad I read these 5 issues, and just left with the feeling it could have been better with a different artist. Another cartoony artist, maybe Steve Lieber, would have been better suited for this. Anyhow, it was a fun read. If you come across the trade and you don't have to spend too much money on it and you want a fun, light read, it's worth it. But maybe you, like me, when you're reading it, will say, well, I can see how this could have been even better. Okay, Little Bird number 9. I'm really torn here because so my love of the Little Bird issues all told, and just how much fun it's been to read, and what an incredible visual pleasure it's been to read, and the intensity of it, all told, all together, make me really love this book. So that buoys it up, even though I'm annoyed because I can't figure out what happened at the end here. And I think I have to go back and read everything to understand it a little better. And hopefully then I will accept what I've read. I did dig up 3 of the 4 previous issues, and I saw that in 2 of these issues, Little Bird dies. And I don't quite understand what's going on with this, I guess, magical resurrection of Little Bird in various issues. So she dies there in issue 3, and she dies at the big end of, or near the end of, chapter 1. This is still kind of, such an intriguing, unusual, great comic that I don't resent it too much for kind of letting me down at the end, even though there's a part of me that I just sometimes get really annoyed at these people who don't put a little more effort in the endings of their comics. Although sometimes it might be something in the middle that you didn't get right, or I as a reader didn't get right, or the writer didn't get right in communicating to me, that then makes the ending not click. So anyway, I do plan to go back and read all of it. I don't know if I'll do that in my single issues. I just have 1 issue that is lost in the piles right now, or whether I will do that when the hardback comes out. Because it's well worth the money for the art alone. The art, meaning the line art and the coloring together. Just a brilliant collaboration between visual artists. And yeah. And there was lots of good imaginative stuff in it, along with it's not just the artist. There was something from the writer, the seeds that the writer planted that gave the artist the ability to do all those things. But it's kind of weird to admit, but I enjoyed reading Captain America and the Invaders, which I don't think came out this past week, but I bought it this past week, so I'm going to talk about it. Captain America and the Invaders in at number 8, a little higher than Little Bird. But I just had a really good time reading this, and I gotta say, I don't really understand why someone like Jerry Ordway, presumably he would like to draw more mainstream comics, but is not getting asked to that often. His style works really well. I don't see why there's this artificial idea that because it was the style of 10 or 15 years, or probably 15 or 20 years ago, that he shouldn't continue to do work in mainstream comics, especially superhero comics. It's just ridiculous not to use a talent like him more. And Roy Thomas coming back told a very solid World War II story. He has no anxiety to do nuance or to have some special message. He's just telling a solid story of something that might have happened between the lines of the history books in a world where Marvel superheroes exist. A little secret moment in the early days of Captain America, a secret moment for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and for the ex-King of England, or ex-Crown Prince of England. My only negative here is the coloring. Not that the colors did anything bad, but he chose kind of shades that I think he thought evoked an older comic. But they just weren't as fun colors to look at. And with this great line art, I just feel the coloring could have been more fun. It didn't hurt the story, did not impede the storytelling or obscure the artwork in any way. So on that level, at least, I'm happy. But just looking at it, I just thought, I can see why it looks this way, but I would like it to look a different way. Okay, in at number 7, kind of a pattern here of things, of ongoing books that have ranked very high for me, kind of ranking a little bit lower. I mean, the Immortal Hulk has usually been in my top 3, and it's coming in at number 7 out of 17. And I think the reason for this is mostly the artwork. So it's a good story, and there's nothing bad about the artwork, but I so love the Joe Bennett artwork, and this artwork just did not speak to me at all. And they decided to do kind of I think with this guest artist or this fill-in artist, they decided to do a little bit of a side story so that, again, it was a good side story about this, to me, evil General Fordian, who is the main Hulk buster right now, going about doing things in very amoral ways. And so it was a very good story about him, but it kind of left the momentum of previous issues down a little bit. So between the fact that this was just felt like a resting point issue, and with art that just didn't have that pizzazz, it was just solid art, but nothing that grabbed me. So it slipped down to the lowly number 7. But like I say, we're deep into the comics that I enjoyed. I would say starting with number 8 in Captain America and the Invaders. So number 8 through number 1 are just all comics that I was just having a ball reading. A surprise for me, a surprise that I even picked this up, was Vampirella. But on a whim, when I was in that second comic book store, I thought, I have this prejudice against reading Vampirella comics. However, because I just find the concept of this micro bikini wearing vampire from another planet, kind of, I don't know, hard to buy into, but it was being written by a author who I often admire, Christopher Priest, and so I decided to give it a shot, and I have to say I really liked it. Christopher Priest is turning this into a really interesting story. Vampirella was part of a plane crash, and as a requirement of a survivor of a plane crash, she has to see a therapist. So she's seen, I don't know if this therapist looks like Christopher Priest. I kind of imagine it as being a cross between Christopher Priest and, say, Sigmund Freud or something. So it's kind of like some double for Christopher Priest is interrogating the reality that Vampirella claims to come from. And there were sometimes the art didn't make it for me, maybe more the coloring, and other times it really was really cool. Like I love this full page shot here where she suddenly grows wings, giant bat wings. And I didn't know she could do that. So that was fun. And there's a last page reveal. I guess I won't give it away. That is interesting. It kind of surprised me and makes me wonder if Christopher Priest maybe is not taking Vampirella too seriously, and maybe that's the best way to go. It's kind of odd that this series is called Seduction of the Innocent, which of course is the name of the famous book from the 50s that caused comics to get censored in the United States, or self-censored, and caused a minor collapse of the comic book industry for a while. Or some people claim that that's not true, but anyway, most historians claim that caused the collapse. I'm thinking of you, Paolo, when I say that, because you pointed me towards that book. I can't remember its title now. That showed through numbers that probably the comic book industry was going down before the Comics Code and all of that came along. So anyhow, surprisingly good. So I think I'll probably put this on my pull list. It is with Dynamite Comics don't feel like they give you as much material as most other indie comics. So that I'm slightly hesitant for that. But I think I'll jump on. Another thing that I picked up on a whim was this #1 book from from Vault Comics called Resonant. I have picked up a number of Vault #1s and been quite disappointed. Like last week I was talking about the one called, what was it called? Time Trap? I can't even remember. But the Christopher Sabella comic that I did not like at all. But anyway, Resonant is a really excellent post-apocalyptic horror book. I think it has a little bit of the concept that comes from Crossed, but much more palatable to me. And the artwork was wonderful. The writing was wonderful. It was evocative. The characters were very quickly created and believable, and it was scary in sort of non-obvious, slowly creeping up on you scariness, which I really appreciated. So this is appearing to be an excellent comic. I don't know how long it will go on for. I'm kind of surprised because the other Vault comics I've seen, the art wasn't nearly as good, the writing wasn't. Didn't wow me, but this is as good as anything in any top flight Image comic or the like. So that Vault comic, Resonant, was in at #5. In at #4 for me was Usagi Yojimbo. Still really loving this. It too is a bit of a horror story, and I like, and it's, some evil person who's using magic to get younger, and evil puppets and things like that are not unfamiliar horror tropes, but it's done in such a different way in a different setting, and the story unfolds in its own unique Stan Sakai way, I suppose, that it just feels very fresh to me, and very just a pleasure as the story unfolds. Sometimes just the pacing of a story makes it special for you, and there's a lot of that going on there. Another one that I couldn't have foreseen liking so much, I just, again, on a whim, picked up another Vault comic. I think both of those Vault comics are because I was in this other shop and I just flipped through them, and a first look at the art made me say, okay, this is worth giving a try. So I really don't like the titles, Syrah and the Royal Stars, but this is looking to be kind of a first-rate fantasy story, kind of like a little bit of an Arabian Nights, a little bit of a Hyborian Age, a little bit of some kind of Miyazaki type of story in a sense. There's just that slight sense of anime there, not really very strong, but again, not just pretty art and nice coloring, but really nice storytelling, the pages, the way things unfold. So there's that pleasure of that. Characters, again, maybe not quite as good as in Resonant, even though I'm ranking this a little higher at number 3. But the characters are very quickly, we're given enough about each character so that we could quickly get a sense of who they are. But I just found it very evocative, dreamlike in a way that I enjoy rather than I'm annoyed by. And so it kind of hit some buttons for me as a fantasy reader that just were extremely pleasurable. So I'm definitely putting this and Resonance on my pull list. But yeah, it's kind of the Conan reader in me, even though it doesn't have the barbarian character, but the rest of the setting and everything has that lived-in fantasy world feeling that I really enjoy. And again, I think this came in at like 28 pages or something. Again, you get one of those indie books you get a lot of material from. Yeah, so number 3. And so all these top books are very close to each other. Lucifer continues with number 10, and as it's a good next step forward in a story that I've been super enjoying, so that doubles my pleasure here. I think if you just came in and read just this issue, you'd just say, well, that's interesting and well done, but is it the best story in the world? But it kind of might be part of one of the best stories around this year. And so it's a great chapter in this story. And I really enjoyed Lucifer's visit now to the underworld, or the afterlife of the Hindu religion, or the Hindu mythos. I wouldn't say religion because everything here is treated as mythology, and Hinduism may be, to the extent that I understand, a living religion, and this probably doesn't really represent that. But it has a mythos, and it's very effective. So yeah, and I really like the art, and I'm really intrigued as to what will happen next. So just a very strong book, strong in the writing and art by Dan Waters. I really hope this book isn't about to end because of shenanigans at DC Comics and their changing of labels and such. So that was number 2, and my big number 1, but really it's very close to all the others. But I decided that there was just something about the art in here, and just a crazy cosmic story was just what I needed this week. So I just feel like I can't get enough of this Trad Moore going all cosmic. I feel like the art was even stronger in this issue than last issue. We, of course, have, one of the field's greatest colorists on here with Dave Stewart. And The script, I guess, this issue really allowed Tradmore to just go crazy with kind of a crazy cosmic battle scene with Null throwing various I don't know what they are, various creatures, various of his knights or what have you, his defenders at the Silver Surfer. So every 2 pages here is just a visual feast. There's this crazy space dragon. If I had any complaint about this, is I did not pick up in the first issue that this is back in time, that by going through whatever black hole Silver Surfer went to, he's actually in, I don't know, millions of years, near the beginning of the universe or something like that. And also, I now understand, which I didn't when I read the first issue, that Null is a character out of kind of the Venom storyline that Donny Cates is creating. So, in effect, this Silver Surfer Black is kind of a side story to the larger Venom story that Cates is telling. I mean, I think I can still enjoy it without reading that Venom story right now. I was planning to read that Venom story when it was all done, or on Marvel Unlimited, or if they put it out in a nice hardback or something like that. So, anyway, my number one. In fact, I like this art so much, I went online and looked up the art dealer who sells his art, and every single page from the Silver Surfer was sold out. And he did a whole bunch of great art in before that, in the Image comic, 5-issue Image comic he worked on called New World. But almost none of that art was sold, and it was selling for a lot less. And it made me think, because I say, oh, why do these great talents go to Marvel or DC when they have these Image comics they should be working on? Well, one aspect might be for the artists that they are earning a lot by selling the original art, and that art collectors are much more interested in the mainstream books, the hot mainstream books that they might be working on, like Hulk or Silver Surfer, than if they're working on a really cool but lower instant identification kind of series like New World. So anyway, looking forward to the rest of this series, hoping that Tradmore keeps getting chances to do wild cosmic comics, because, man, he is made for that. Okay, wow, 37 minutes. Well, 17 comics in 37 minutes, not too bad. Again, as always, thanks to those of you who actually watch my whole videos, because I know I'm someone who just turns on the camera and can't stop talking. And I love all you guys who leave comments. I got a lot of comments on my last countdown video, and I really loved it. I really appreciated it. Makes me want to keep doing these. And I love the communication. So till next time, I'll see you soon.